You are now watching Lesage, the best place to learn about competitive Pokemon TCG. Let's get it! What's poppin' YouTube? Welcome back to the channel, Lesage here. Today we're going to be covering over the top 10 best decks in format. So these are the results of all of the Play Limitless events. I went through, carefully calculated everything, showcased the best list that I've seen, created a lot of content with them, all that great stuff, but at the end of the day, this video will clearly show you the best performing decks right now into the game heading into this week. So if you want a bunch of great decks, they are going to be in the pinned comment below. You can copy and paste them right into PTCGO. All the cards are there, you can build them in real life, and there's a reference video for most of the decks. If there's not a reference video yet, I'm still working on it. Feel free to check out the link, the description below for links to all of my sponsors, all that great stuff. That being said, let's jump into our number 10 spot, see exactly what's going on with these decks. Starting off strong at number 10, we have INTELEON VMAX. Now, INTELEON VMAX is a deck that I thought could easily be the best deck in format, because this deck seems to stay alive forever if your opponent cannot one-shot it. So the way that this deck works, it's kind of like a gigantic tank. You have the INTELEON VMAX with 320 HP. If your opponent can't do 320 damage to it, they can't knock it out, obviously. So they're going to try to two-shot it or three-shot it or however many attacks it takes. At that point, you can use your attack, you do 70 damage, and if you bring your energy back to your hand, you could do an additional 70, so 140. Well, it's a Rapid Strike Pokemon, so you could use Rapid Strike energy, lift that energy right back, and then leave yourself with no energy. That seemingly works with Cheryl, so after you lift the energy back, you can play Cheryl down, heal all the damage on all of your evolution Pokemon, and then restart that combo. Of course, you could grab those cards with the Drizzile, the Shady Dealings, Engine, and of course, if you need to do extra damage, which, I mean, 140 is not a lot, but you could add extra damage with Quick Shooting INTELEON, and of course, INTELEON VMAX has the Double Gunner ability as well. We can give it more HP with Big Charm. There's a lot of cool things that are just in this deck. As you can see throughout the list, you can use Octillery to search out Karina's Focus, or maybe a Fan of Waves. I've gone through and I've carefully grabbed all the cards and made sure that this deck was just the best way that I could possibly build this deck. And I mean, the set's been out for like about a week and a half now, so these lists are getting pretty refined right now with like a full week of just like maybe about 100 tournaments, maybe 50 tournaments, I don't know. Play Limitless has a lot of tournaments. Regardless, INTELEON VMAX seems good. The reason why it's placed so lowly is just because it doesn't have enough knocking out power. So decks that can knock it out, it typically loses to. There are quite a few decks that can just knock out INTELEON VMAX. Beyond that, the deck is a little bit slow to set up, so it might not necessarily be the best deck in a best of one setting. However, I do think INTELEON VMAX has a lot of room to grow, and as the metagame continuously progresses, I think there's definitely a spot for INTELEON VMAX. I wouldn't be surprised if this deck made it back in the lower top 10 next week, or maybe it could even shoot up a little bit. Right now, with Fusion Strike still being so new, anything could really happen to a lot of these decks, so I'm going to be a little bit more loose, but right now I think INTELEON VMAX is a pretty soft spot in the lower top 10 of the list. Rolling into our number 9 spot, we have JOLTEON VMAX. So this is one of the Evolving Skies era decks that we haven't necessarily seen too much of, but we have seen enough of it where it is seeing success. I think the reason why this deck is seeing success is because you don't need a lot to snipe a bench or anything else like that. A lot of decks have bench, a lot of bench sizes are quite big, and Max Thunder Rumble can definitely take advantage of that. Of course, there's also INTELEON VMAX and a couple SUICUNE archetypes that are doing well right now, so of course, capitalizing on that lightning type weakness can certainly be beneficial whenever possible. That being said, JOLTEON VMAX is the same as it ever has been. I mean, in the last few weeks of the Evolving Skies Celebrations metagame, the deck did gain Dusknoir, Peonia, and Dream Ball, so basically the combination of putting Dream Ball in your prize cards with Peonia and then carefully ripping it to get the Dusknoir in play to stop special energies. That's still going to be very effective nowadays because there's a lot of decks that are playing special energies. So the combination of playing a spread deck, mid-range control, is the same way that we saw Dragapult take the number 1 spot for most of the Evolving Skies metagame. This isn't really any different than JOLTEON VMAX, and I mean, maybe even Dragapult will take advantage of that in the future as well, or other decks might take advantage of the Dusknoir package. Either way, JOLTEON VMAX seems like a safe bet. So if you are new to our Fusion Strike metagame or new to the game, some of these older decks or not 100% brand new decks, I mean, Mew right now at the time costs about 250 Fusion Strike packs to build on PTCGO, and that's based off the PTCGO prices. It's going to fluctuate on a day-to-day basis, but if we're going based off current code prices, we're looking at anywhere between 200 to 250 US in just straight up codes from many of the large code card websites. That being said, Jolteon's going to be a little bit of a cheaper deck than that. Might not be the absolute cheapest, but if you already have Jolteon VMAX and you're looking to find a deck that's still good in this format, still performing well, then Jolteon VMAX might be the deck for you. If you are picking up any codes, feel free to use code ZLESAGE5, that's in the description as well, at PTCGOstore.com. That will get you 5% on your discount of codes off your next order, so be sure to check that out. And Jolteon VMAX, we'll see how it goes. I think it's just a generally solid deck, so it's likely going to stay in the lower half of the top 10 in my opinion. Hopping into our number 8 spot is a deck that I didn't expect to see here anymore, and that is Turbo Zacian with Zamazenta. So I, like many others, thought that this metal deck was very good in our Evolving Skies metagame, made it into the top 5, and it's because this deck is accessible, it's really easy to play. Basically, the way to play this deck is you attach an energy on your first turn to Zacian V, use Intrepid Sword, maybe using it with Rotom Phone or Primate Wisdom to try to stack a metal energy on top of your deck, or you might just raw go for it, hit those energies, and you go for a turn 2 Brave Blade with Boss's Orders to knock out pretty much any Pokemon V your opponent has their way. If your opponent has Pokemon VMAX in play, well, you might just go with Zamazenta V and hope that they have no way to get through Dauntless Shield. Not the most elaborate strategy, but it does have a great way to just go through some decks. Anyways, it is one of those things where this deck just really popped back out of nowhere. Of course, it had a few placements here or there, but it was really Joshua Sutherland who was able to take this deck all the way to a first place finish at the $500 GG Tour tournament. It's one of those things where when a player knows a deck inside and out, Josh has always played Luke Metal and other Turbo Zacian based decks. So understanding of these Pokemon, was able to take an otherwise underplayed deck and win the entire tournament. I think that means that this deck is going to kind of skyrocket a little bit in playability. And again, with this deck being so budget central, I mean, I think you could build this deck for literally like 30 Fusion Strike packs. Again, so that's like $20, $30 from any major code website in terms of codes. It is one of those things where this deck is just great. In this metagame, you could take some early cheesy wins, and that's really where this deck is going to see strength from. So again, not the most elaborate strategy, not the craziest deck in the format, but again, it is pretty cool. I will recover this video on the channel real soon. Slipping and sliding into number 7, we have LEAFEON VMAX. So LEAFEON VMAX, again, one of these decks from Evolving Skies Celebrations metagame, and of course it's still seeing success. I actually thought this deck would see a little bit more success than it currently has, but it looks like it's on the upcoming grind. So, if you're wondering if this deck is going to go up next week, I think it is going to go up a little bit heading into this week and the next week after that, and that's because Single Strike Urshifu VMAX has a gigantic glaring weakness to either the retreat cost or Umbreon VMAX. Now you might be like, a retreat cost, Zach? Well, it's one of those things where Grass Knot for Grass and Colorless does 60 times the amount of retreat cost your opponent's active Pokemon has. So in the case of Single Strike Urshifu VMAX, and of course there's other strong matchups out here, but that is one of the top decks in the format. No leaks, no, don't want to ruin the list for anyone, but that deck did make it quite far up this week, and it's been everywhere, so I'm sure a lot of y'all were expecting that. Grass Knot's doing 300 damage for the 2 retreat costs, or that the Galar Mine adds to the retreat costs, and the 3 base retreat costs that they have. So they have 5 retreat costs on a Single Strike Urshifu VMAX that's 300. They probably took some damage from their Single Strike energies that they attach with Single Strike Roar on the Houndoom. That does 2 damage counters per. So it really works out that LEAFEON VMAX can basically OHKO their main Pokemon. Their other Pokemon, Umbreon VMAX, is also weak to grass. I mean, Mew VMAX has 0 retreat, so that's going to be a bit of a tough matchup. But some LEAFEON lists are also adding in Galarian Moltres and other dark type Pokemon to deal with that matchup. Maybe this deck will kind of transform in the next week or so to really add those in, but right now a lot of players are seeing success with the straight up LEAFEON VMAX. And of course, it's going to see some success against the Gengar variants, as long as they're not playing too many Hiding Dark. Of course, you have Fan of Waste for that. the deck's basically adapted towards the metagame, has some top matchups around there, so if you're beating some of the most played decks, you can kind of hang out there. And again, I think as those decks continue to become more and more played, it's one of those things where it's just going to grow from there. Sliding into our number 6 position, and arguably the most controversial inclusion in this list is going to be Gengar VMAX. So a lot of top players in the game have gone out of their way to say that Gengar VMAX is terrible. And I find that they don't really add a lot of context to that. So as a channel that tries to keep everyone well informed in the metagame and well versed in all of that stuff, I do want to let people know that Gengar VMAX is not bad. I've personally been able to take this deck to a first place finish, a second place finish, and a top 8 finish on Play Limitless tournaments this past week alone. So in the past literal week, I've been able to have some top finishes with Gengar VMAX and single strike variants in general. So I've learned a thing or two about these decks. Gengar VMAX is all about using less energies and less resources than a single strike Urshifu VMAX. The fact that it's already at number 6 is probably just because of the players being naysayers about this deck and saying that this deck sucks, or players playing different builds. Azul GG was able to win a tournament with Gengar VMAX playing an INTELEON version of the deck. So I think just the fact that there's ways to make this deck work, different builds, all that stuff, I think Gengar VMAX is lowly placed on this list. However, it might say lowly placed if people do not play it. And I don't want to be like, hey everyone, no one's playing Gengar, play Gengar. I don't want to be that type of channel, and I'm not going to tell people to play a deck if they don't want to play a deck. I'm just saying this deck is lowly placed. Based off of my experience playing this deck, it is quite good. So you have access to Fear and Panic. If your opponent has a few Pokemon V in play or VMAX, you could hit likely for a knockout on some of those Pokemon V, or you get hit for a 2-shot for only 2 energies. That means that if you stumble a little bit earlier, which single strike is one of the most inconsistent engines in the game, and that's not the selling point for the deck. I'm just saying, if there's a deck that's going to clunk up or brick up a little bit, it's going to be a single strike deck. It just seems to be like that in my experience. When you set up, you win. If you don't set up, you're going to struggle. Well, this deck requires a little bit less setup because the attacks cost a little bit less energies. And then of course you have GMAX Swallow Up that can hit very hard and get a knockout on most Pokemon VMAX because of single strike energy. Of course, the deck has the same attributes of a single strike deck with single strike Roar and Umbreon VMAX's Dark Signal. The cool thing that I've added in here recently is Zinnia's Resolve. That seems to be helping a little bit. I cut a couple Marnies, added a couple Zinnias, just to give yourself more cards in your hand. Most decks are filling up their bench quite a lot, so that's one thing that I do want to let people know. I am experimenting with Zinnia's Resolve. I think that card is very good. Expected to put in more decks coming up soon, especially as players are playing decks such as SUICUNE. There's a couple SUICUNE decks in the top 10. Any single strike variant has a large bench. SUICUNE decks have a large bench. Mew decks have a large bench. INTELEON decks have a large bench. I mean, we're in a large bench format. Zinnia's Resolve is a very good card, and it's very underrated right now. So that being said, I think Gengar is good. We're going to experiment with it a little bit more, but it might go down if players play it less. Obviously, if players play it more and realize that it's actually a good deck, I think Gengar is very much a top 5-ish deck. I mean, it is at number 6 already, so maybe it's appropriately placed, but I currently think it's a little bit too low on this list from a personal standpoint. Hopping into our number 5 spot is SYLVEON VMAX. So again, going with the theme of Evolving Skies decks seeing a lot of success. They are seeing a lot of success in our Fusion Strike metagame. I think SYLVEON VMAX is good because it's kind of a catch-all to a lot of these decks in format. So if you run into a Rapid Strike, Urshifu, VMAX, Melanie deck, of course you're a Psychic type deck now, and SYLVEON VMAX is going to be great at OHKOing those type of Pokemon. If you run into a Single Strike Urshifu deck, you are a Psychic type deck, and it's very good. You have Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX for a lot of these setup decks. A lot of the decks are playing Lotads and Drizziles and Houndours, so you could easily prey on those type of Pokemon. And of course, Pokemon like Jolteon and Gengar are both weak to fighting type decks. You got Blaziken V and VMAX for when your opponent's playing a Turbo ZACIAN deck, a LEAFEON deck, a Genesect V. Octillery surges things out with Rapid Strike Surge. Galarian Moltres V can take down a Shadow Rider deck, a Dragapult deck. It can take down a Mew VMAX deck. So just in terms of different typing, this deck seems to really have it all. Beyond that, the goal of this deck is to really use Max Harmony, play a bunch of different types of Pokemon on your bench and hit hard with SYLVEON VMAX, or you could play it as a box style deck and really attack your opponent's Pokemon with the proper techs for that matchup. Obviously match the Pokemon type to your opponent's weakness, and you're probably laughing, right? So overall, this deck's cool. I find that Sylveon's a little bit inconsistent or a mess when you play this deck. It's fine. I think it's a great choice in this metagame, especially if you don't necessarily want to drop the 250 Fusion Strike packs to build Mew VMAX, which, surprise, surprise, we haven't seen so far, so it's probably still up there, but again, no leaks. I did add Zinnia's Resolve to this deck. It is great at discarding those Dark Energies for Galarian Moltres V while keeping a large hand, which is great when you have all these options. Maybe you could hold on to those Fan of Waves, Escape Ropes, Tool Scrapper, stuff like that. You don't always want to pitch that stuff away with research. That's why Zinnia's is a great in-between card. Overall, I think that this deck is probably just going to always improve itself. I mean, you could find ways to add an INTELEON VMAX into this deck, or maybe you could even add a LEAFEON line, or change a bunch of stuff. I mean, it's one of those decks that just seems to be successful no matter what. So as more and more players continuously see success with this, I do think that it is going to be one of those mid-tier decks, so like a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 kind of range. Not really at the top, not really at the bottom, but Sylveon's always going to be good. Jumping into our number 4 spot, and one that was also surprising to me, again, one of these older decks in our format that came out in Evolving Skies. I mean, it's not old, it's a couple months old. Ice Rider CALYREX VMAX with SUICUNE. So I've actually lowered the Ice Rider CALYREX VMAX line in this deck just to a 1/1, and the goal of this deck is to really attack with options, using the Melanie card to attach a water energy from your discard pile, accelerate an energy to one of your Pokemon V, and attack. So SUICUNE V being a basic can attack with Blizzard Rondo pretty quickly, or you got Ice Rider CALYREX VMAX that requires a little bit more setup, and you can use Ride of the High King or Max Lands to whichever way you really want to fit the numbers that you need. This deck has played Path to the Peak to kind of get around those Mew Genesect numbers. You got Cape of Toughness. One thing that I might want to add back into this deck is a Tool Scrapper. I've been heavily debating it, but you want to know what? We'll have to see exactly how it goes. Maybe if you want to add a Tool Scrapper, I would cut a Path to the Peak from this deck. Overall, a deck like this seems pretty well because it can just choose your own path throughout the game. It's kind of a neutral-ish deck, so you're not necessarily going to have a bunch of options throughout the game, or maybe you do have enough options. You have the Shady Dealings engine that can kind of search through what you're looking for. You can attack with Ice Rider, you can attack with SUICUNE. Basically, you have 2 attackers that you could choose from for any situation, and then really just make the most of it. I think this is the type of deck that could either stay the same or go down. I don't necessarily see Ice Rider going up, unless of course it randomly spikes a large tournament like my late night series. Also, shameless plug, be sure to check out my late night series every single Monday. They start at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. That's Toronto. I always name the city Toronto time. But it's one of those things where you can totally check them out. Free prizing of $200 Atlas Store credit, 100 PTCGO codes from PTCGO Store, and of course, we're going to have an invitational in about a month or so. So be sure to check that out. But yeah, this deck's pretty cool. And all the lists, again, are in the pinned comments with reference videos for most of these decks. So be sure to check that out. Here we are at our number 3 spot. We got SUICUNE V with Ludicolo. So very similar to what we just saw in our last deck. It is another SUICUNE V base deck. And the goal of this deck is, because Blizzard Rondo can only cap out at 220 damage, that's 20 damage for the SUICUNE, both bench being full, 100 per each side, 20, 100, 100, 220. Ludicolo allows you to use Enthusiastic Dance, increase that by 1 hundo when you evolve it from either a Lombre or a Rare Candied Lotad. That turns Blizzard Rondo into a 320 damage attack that can knock out most Pokemon VMAX in the format, and really allowing you to scale your numbers as necessary. So you gotta ask yourself, is Blizzard Rondo enough to do the 220? Does that knock out the Pokemon Vs? Or maybe 2-shot these Pokemon, etc., etc.? Or do I need Ludicolo to boost that attack up a little bit more? Ludicolo is also great if your opponent's under benching, or if you just need to hit a little bit more. There's also quick shooting that allows you to place those damage counters. So you gotta look at between Blizzard Rondo's natural damage, your bench, your opponent's bench, Enthusiastic Dance, and quick shooting. If you're able to manage that, SUICUNE V is pretty easy to play after that, where you're slapping a Cape of Toughness on that Pokemon, you're playing Melanie Accelerating Energies, and of course you have that wonderful Shady Dealings engine that seems to be featured in about 50% of the decks in the top 10, if not more. What really more could you ask for? Again, this deck's a little bit on the cheaper side. Now that Evolving Skies has been out for a minute, SUICUNE V are abundant, and there's a lot of them on PTCGO trades. So if you are looking for a deck that is going to be relatively strong for the foreseeable future, I don't see how SUICUNE V is necessarily going to change. You always have access to Ludicolo to scale your damage, so even if there are new Pokemon such as V-Stars that are coming out in Brilliant Star or anything else like that in future sets, SUICUNE V can always scale the damage to whatever numbers you need to hit, and that's always going to make sure that this deck is relevant, or at least Ludicolo is relevant, and as long as we have SUICUNE, Ludicolo, and Melanie, I don't see why we don't play this combination. So that being said, I think SUICUNE is a great deck. If anything, it's probably going to stay within the top 5. That's my current guess, but it could always move up a little bit, and it did have that second place finish at the $500 GG Tour tournament by Gabriel Samedo, really cementing its early success. I used to play 3 Lotads and no Lombre, and the reason why I've switched to 2 Lotads and 1 Lombre is because Lotad is not necessarily going to be a target with there being less sniping decks in the format. So as decks like Dragapult have taken a backseat off, they are currently not in the top 10 anymore. They went from the #1 performing deck to not in the top 10. Lotad's a little bit safe. So that also means that if your deck's playing the 70 HP Sobbles, you might be able to survive a little bit more. We'll have to see exactly how it goes, but that's my general 2 cents on that kind of situation. Overall, SUICUNE Ludicolo, busted deck. Hopping into our number 2 spot, we have Single Strike Urshifu VMAX with Umbreon VMAX. Now, I don't necessarily want to go into too many details because I really covered this deck when we went over Gengar, but the goal is you are a single strike deck. Everything has the single strike stamp on it that can attack with this deck for the most part. So you use Single Strike Roar to power up either Umbreon V or Umbreon VMAX to attack against Pokemon that are weak to Dark, or Pokemon that you can knock out without going through any adverse side effect. If you need to go for a little bit more than that, feel free to use Single Strike Urshifu VMAX to knock out those Pokemon. Pokemon included in that would be Pokemon that are Pokemon VMAX, because with the 270 damage base for G-Max 1 blow and a few Single Strike energies, you could really knock out any Pokemon in the game, and it goes through anything. So you can knock out a Zamazenta V, Dauntless Shield, you can knock out I'm trying to think of other Pokemon VMAX. You can knock out a Single Strike Urshifu VMAX. There's a lot of things that you could just knock out in general. Single Strike Urshifu V obviously is the vessel to get there, but you could also use it against JOLTEON V, or you could use it against Gengar VMAX, or anything else like that that's weak to fighting. There's also a few Eternatus decks that have been seeing success as well, so being a fighting type deck obviously has its perks. Overall, I think this deck just seems to work pretty well. I use Zinnia's Resolve here again, just because you want to have those access to cards in your hand, and with bench sizes being at a pretty all-time high right now, or a format high, it's one of those things where I think it's very good. Tool Jammer seems very good when you're playing against a SUICUNE deck that plays Capes, so as Capes come back, we're going to see more Tool Jammers, Tool Scrappers, stuff like that. Overall, I think this is a pretty balanced build of the deck, and pretty equipped for the metagame. So if you're looking to play a list, by all means, play Zinnia's Resolve in your list. I think it's the real deal. If not, you could always replace them with Marnie's if you think that I'm crazy. And it's very possible that I'm crazy. As a player that's been playing for 15 years, sometimes I find myself being stuck in fancy play syndrome, or playing cards that I just think are cool at certain times. Probably not going to really hurt your deck too much, but maybe you're going to find yourself discarding too many important cards with Zinnia's. For those who are not necessarily in tune with the card, you pitch 2 cards and you draw a card for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. If your opponent has, or each of your opponent's Pokemon. So your opponent's got 6 Pokemon in play, you pitch 2, and then you draw 6. This deck can really pitch away a lot of cards because they're not necessarily important, and Zinnia's Resolve draws you 6 cards, which gives you a lot of options. Urns, Umbreon VMAX, stuff like that. That's why I think this deck's pretty cool. So again, give it a try. I recently covered this deck on my channel, and we also have it covered on the Shuffle Squad as well. I also create content for the Shuffle Squad, so check out my content there and the rest of the stuff from all of my other teammates as well. So here we have it. We made it all the way to our #1 spot, and we are featuring the very busted Mew VMAX that just came out with Fusion Strike. So Mew VMAX is awesome because it has free retreat, has the ability to copy your Fusion Strike Pokemon in play. It's max miracle attack, can go through anything. Genesect V can draw whatever you want, and when there's attacks that you can copy that can just do 210 for 2 energies, or you could use Latias to stop your opponent's Pokemon VMAX from doing damage, or you could reduce damage with Oricorio. There's a lot of cool things going on here, and if anyone's been playing for longer than a few minutes, they might be able to remember popular decks such as Mewtwo and Mew GX, and being able to copy your opponent's stuff or copy your own stuff or anything else like that has always been very good in the TCG. So Mew VMAX really going with that whole theme of Mewtwo Mew and all those cards throughout the years, copying stuff. It's good as it always has been. Other things that make it really cool are Peony, an underutilized supporter that allows you to pitch your hand, grab 2 trainer cards, and really make things happen. That allows you to use Fusion Strike System to draw a bunch of cards. Fusion Strike System allows you to draw cards for each of your Fusion Strike Pokemon in play per Genesect V, so you can use it multiple times to basically draw through your stuff. You got Elsa's Sparkle that can accelerate Fusion Strike energy to your Pokemon. Power Tablet is like Electro Power for your Fusion Strike Pokemon, so just being able to hit extra hard, you can knock out a VMAX basically once a game. Cram-O-Matic, an underutilized trainer card. I mean, I can't necessarily call it underutilized because it's in the #1 deck, but it's a card that we didn't necessarily think was going to be great. You pitch a card from your hand, flip a coin, if heads, search your deck for anything. Cram-O-Matic can make for some exciting gameplay. Cross switch, you're playing 2 cards at once. There's a lot of really cool cards in this deck, and I think Mew VMAX really just takes the cake for utilizing them all really well. This list is Gabe Smart's. He made top 4 at the Black Rock cash event with this deck, and I know that he's been grinding his butt off so hard with this deck, and it's one of those things where as someone who tests with him regularly and sees how much effort he puts into these decks, I agree with this list 100% right now. Obviously, Mew VMAX is still evolving as an archetype, and there's other ways to play this deck. There's Toxtricity builds, there's Huntail builds, I've even seen Celigore builds. So by all means, I don't want to necessarily say that this is the list forever, but this is the list right now. I think it's awesome, and it is likely worth the 250 Fusion Strike packs. It is the real deal. It's not like it's a Rayquaza VMAX deck. It is performing at the utmost level and just taking up the most tournament spots. For example, this deck has as many as 6 times as many positions as the #10 INTELEON VMAX deck. So just comparing it for the way that I ranked points, this deck is clear, this deck ranked 1,300 points on the scale that I use. Single Strike was 1,000, and then the next deck under that was like 400. So just to give you a scale of how well Mew VMAX is doing, if we have SUICUNE LUDICOLO at 400 and we have INTELEON around 200, this deck is absolutely crazy at 1,400. And of course, when I record these videos, there's always a few tournaments that slip through the cracks, and I see Mew VMAX continuously seeing success. So if you haven't got a chance to pick up Mew, by all means, I think it's totally worth it if you can afford it. Trade, play those online tournaments, do well in the late night series. That's a great way to get some free packs. I know it's really hard to pick up those codes. You could always use code ZLESAGE5 at PTCGO to save 5% off your order. Feel free to DM me if there's anything else I can help you with. I totally would, but Mew VMAX is the real deal. And that's what we got going on for this video today, peeps. Hopefully you enjoyed watching this, learning a little bit more about the metagame, and really learning about these decks. For any decks that I don't necessarily have a reference video for, I have a list, a whiteboard on my wall right here. It's just right off the camera that has a long list of decks that I plan on covering on my channel. So stay tuned for all that. And if there's any decks that you want to see covered, by all means, let me know in the comments. I totally get back to everyone's comments. I would love for all of you to join the Discord. The link is in the description. Let me know what you want. Hit me up in the DMs. And if anyone's looking for coaching in this format, if they're feeling a little bit lost, or if they have any of their in real life 1K events or any tournaments coming up, or just preparing for their next online event, I do offer personal coaching services as well. You could DM me on Twitter or on Discord. I've helped turn players into regional championships, international champions, and even a world champion along the way. All that great stuff. I just want to let people know that that's an option. If you do want early access to all my deck lists as well, you can pick them up by becoming a YouTube channel member. So I have put all of my lists in Discord days before I put them up here, and I'm always tinkering on decks throughout the week. The same package goes with the Patreon. Again, all these things are in the description, so if you want to help support me as a content creator or just improve your game, You can check out the description for all that. Again, I hope that everyone enjoys these weekly Monday videos around noon Eastern, so be sure to stay tuned for next week. I do a top 5 video on the Shuffle Squad's channel, so check them out at the Shuffle Squad on YouTube. I do a top 5 heading into the weekend. So if you want a little bit of a preview of what this video is going to be like, or if you just want more content from me, check out the Shuffle Squad as well. I appreciate everyone watching. Have yourself a wonderful week, and I hope to catch you later at my late night series starting later tonight around 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Again, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments or hit me up in the DMs. Peace out and have a great day. I truly appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch this video. It means the world to me. And my goal with this channel is to spread my love of the game and knowledge with our entire Pokemon TCG community. If you haven't already, help signal boost this video to other Pokemon TCG fans by liking it, sharing it with your friends, and subscribing to the channel. Hopefully we reach our goals really soon. Check out this recommended video, and have yourself a great day. Thanks.